to the Real Ethereal show. What a great ride this has been. And thank you, viewers. You know who you are. I've gotten to know a few of you on the message boards and through social media, but can't thank you enough for watching and participating and having the desire to want to grow and learn more things. It just delights us. Today, I'm going to give you, whatever you want to call it, another installment in my astrology series. And we're going to talk about the air houses today. Now, I've already done the earth houses, the water houses. I'm going to do the air houses today, and I'm also going to give you the fire houses. All of the 12 signs are divided up into 4 modalities of element. And today we're going to talk about the air signs, which we all love. And, everybody has, I think this is relevant, you guys, because everybody has in their chart all 3 air signs represented. Maybe it's on the cusp of their houses, or you might even have some planets in the air signs, or you may have a part of your 3 main personality traits, which, as we talk about the 3-legged stool, I know I say this over and over, but I think it's good to repeat, which is your moon sign, your ascendant, and your sun sign. You could have one of those in an air sign. So I think this is relevant for us to understand all the elements, because they really, when we talk about elements in astrology, it's just another language for archetypes and common energies that human beings have. So it's really about the consciousness, you guys, of energies and understanding the negative sides and the positive sides of those energies and how we can best use those energies in our life to be better people. So what is the air element and what does that represent? Well, air represents the 3 signs of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. They represent the 3 houses of the 3rd house, the 7th house, and the 11th house. And if you've watched previous episodes about elements, you'll understand that means it's 120 degrees between each of these houses, which means they trine. So what does trine mean in astrology? Trine means that is the most harmonious relationship between things, is a trine. And the trines always have to do with the elements. So all of the air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, trine each other at 120 degrees. So that means that they're happy together. So when you think about relationship charts, or if you read, sort of those fun things that talk about what's your best mate, they're really talking about trines, and they're really talking about elements if you dig a little deeper. In other words, Aquariuses get along great with the other 2 air signs, which are Gemini and Libra, and vice versa. Libra gets along with Gemini and Aquarius the best because they're made of the same stuff. The other thing about the elements, I'll say again, is think about the 4 elements: earth, water, air, fire. So out of those 4 elements, which ones get along better? Water and earth get along better. I always say water finds a home in earth, and earth is nourished by water. Not so much with air. How does air get along with earth? What does it do? How does air get along with water? How do they connect? It's kind of an awkward connection, right? It doesn't just dovetail. Well, what does air get along with? Fire. Air feeds fire. And fire, gets bigger and illuminates air. So air and fire signs work really beautifully together. So in relationships, whether they be parental, love relationships, employer-employee, whatever the relationship, friendships, air and fire signs pretty typically really like each other. Let's start with some of the positive and integrated qualities of air in general, and then some of the disintegrated, not so positive qualities of air. We'll start with the disintegrated. spacey, scattered. They air signs at times when they're disintegrated or stressed can be disassociative, non-emotional. Remember, the element water is really where we find a lot of the emotions, right? So air is a little bit more detached from emotions. They can be very judgmental. They can be analytical. They can sort of ignore the human aspects to things and just lean more into the intellectual aspects of things. They can be, quite frankly, sociopathic, narcissistic. I guess what I'm trying to describe here is air signs, when they're disintegrated or stressed, can be very separate from human connection in a physical or an emotional way. Let's talk about positive aspects of air signs. They represent the mind. They represent the intellect. All air signs do. So that's their home, you guys. Just like all the water signs, their home is in water. Their home is in the emotional world. Well, air signs love intellectual pursuits. They love debate. They love science. They love analytics. They love all kinds of learning, education, again, debate, anything having to do with theories, philosophies, all kinds of arts, but that are arts that are about intellectual worlds and making people think. When you think about air signs connecting, which they do connect, it's not like they're just disassociative from people, but they don't connect necessarily in an emotional way or in a physical way. So it's not about touching so much. A lot of times they cannot be the touchy types. They might not be the emotional types, but they love to connect with people in the mind, right? So all the air signs, the way to an air sign's heart, if they have a ton of air, if somebody has a ton of air in their chart, it's good conversation. It's being fun, interesting, being well-read, having an interesting life, being very smart, having intellect, having, a lot of knowledge about different topics. So that is the love language for most air signs. Okay, so let's talk about the first house of air signs, which is the third house, which corresponds to Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury. So Gemini is the mutable air sign. So we talk about all the signs are divided into three categories. So mutable, fixed, and cardinal. And every element has a mutable sign, a fixed sign, and a cardinal sign. So Gemini is the mutable air sign. What does that mean? It means that they rule air qualities, i.e. intellect, quickness, communication, etc., but in a mutable way. So Geminis, they go with the flow. They switch gears often. They can be led, quite frankly. They are very mercurial. Mercury rules them. So what does that mean? They don't stay still. So that is all of the attributes that we assign to the third house. So let's say you're even a Taurus, something very different than any type of air sign, but you have a lot of activity going on in your third house. That means you are influenced a lot by air in your life. The third house rules all kinds of communication. So that means writing, speaking, TV, movies, any literature, any of those, any way that you can communicate, language in general. Third house. It also rules short trips, not long trips, short trips. So transportation, it rules flight, cars, airplanes, trains, mobility of any kind. That's all ruled by the third house. So somebody with a strong third house is going to be a good communicator, or if it's badly aspect, have issues with communication. They're going to want to move around a lot. They're going to want to travel a lot. They're going to get bored easily. They're going to have all of those qualities, or they're going to be shaded by all of those Gemini qualities. Okay, so let's talk about the next air house, which is the seventh house. And again, remember we talked about all the air signs in a way rule communication, but they rule it in different ways. Libra is the cardinal air sign, which means, out of the mutable, cardinal, and fixed, cardinal is the leader of the signs. What are the other cardinal signs in the other elements? Capricorn is the cardinal earth sign. Cancer is the cardinal water sign. Aries is the cardinal fire sign. So a Libra cardinal house or cardinal sign is the air leader. What does that mean? Libras lead with a air quality mentally. They lead intellectually. They lead through verbal communication. They lead through analytics. They lead through planning. They lead through ideas. Okay? So the other thing about the seventh house is the marriage and partnership house. So anything having to do with the seventh house, that's where you look to how you communicate one-on-one with your partner. What kind of partnerships will you have? That's Libra. Libra is the sign of the scales, so it's actually about balance, which is the symbol of the scales, but it's intellectually and mind-wise, what would be your best partner? That's what you look for on that cusp of the seventh house. What would be your best partner? Is it an earth sign? Is it a water sign? But it's about who are you going to best get along with or find balance with. That's the seventh house. House of marriage and partnerships. It could also denote business partnerships as well. What's interesting too about all these houses is what their opposite house is. And I like to really talk about the seventh house in terms of its opposite house, because it's the first house is its opposite house. That's a really strong part of someone's chart to look at. How does their first house relate to their seventh house? In other words, the first house is you. It's about yourself. How does that relate to a partnership? Do you dominate in a partnership? Is a partnership good for you? Are you somebody who likes a partnership? Do you have a partnership that eclipses yourself, or do you as a person eclipse your partnership, right? So those are interesting things to think about, the relationship of your seventh house to your first house. Okay, the 11th house is Aquarius. Now Aquarius is the fixed air sign. And what does fixed mean? Fixed is the stubborn sign of the element that we're talking about. So interesting about Aquarius, and I'm going to do a whole show on Aquarius. Aquarius is very much about listening to everyone, non-judgment, democracy, equality, humanity, having a global perspective. So all of that doesn't sound very stubborn. But personally, Aquarians are extremely stubborn. They get very fixed in how something's done. They get very fixed on their own individuality. Do not encroach upon my individuality. I will never judge or encroach upon yours, but don't encroach upon my individuality. So an 11th house, if you have a strong 11th house, or look at your 11th house for issues of how are you individual, how do you fit in the world, how are you going to affect the world, what's your impact on the world, how do you view the world. So it's a really good, if someone has their sun in the 11th house, I always look for or encourage them to get involved in global issues. Their life and their mode of living, or their destiny, if you will, probably is going to have a lot to do with something global, whether it be philanthropy, a cause. It could be politics. It could be, working for the CDC and being involved in a disease that helps people in another country. Oprah Winfrey lives such a life. Well, she's an Aquarius, but she has such an 11th house life. It's all about the ripple effect of how everybody's connected in the world. That's 11th house issue, ruled by Aquarius. So what you do, by understanding houses is, what's on the cusp of your 11th house. It could be any of the 12 signs, It could be, let's say Taurus is on the cusp of your 11th house. So you would deal with global issues or have a relationship to the world in general, maybe through the perspective of a Taurus viewpoint. So that would mean you might be into, Taurus is an earth sign, so you might be into sustainability issues or, issues having to do with the earth, global warming, things of that nature. So whatever the slant is, you put it into a global perspective. The 11th house also rules, the next, everything that's next, all the new inventions. It also rules any kind of electronics, computers, new technology, new inventions. So it rules all of that. The other thing that I look for in a person's 11th house is how do they develop and keep friend networks. The 11th house rules friendship. So I would look at that house and I would look at the sign that's on the cusp of that house with someone, or I would look at the planets in that house and I would use that to figure out what is their A, relationship to the world, right? But B, how are they friends with folks? What kind of friend network do they have? Somebody with, we'll use Taurus again. Somebody who has Taurus on their cusp, or even Cancer on their cusp, they're homebodies, right? They're not the most social folks. They're not the life of the party necessarily. So if they are on the cusp of the 11th house, what would their friend groups be about? Well, they'd probably be smaller. They'd probably be deeper. They would probably love to have people in their home, entertain in their home. What if Gemini's on your 11th house? So that might be somebody who travels all over the world. That might be somebody who literally has a friend in every country, right? That would be somebody who might speak other languages, who might, really be involved in other cultures all over the world. They would have a global perspective on friendship. So that's really how you use some of these houses to figure out how these air elements work in your life. So what's another really good way to use this knowledge about elements? When you look at your chart or someone else's chart, it's really good to understand how many planets are in each element or how many cusps of the houses are in each element. In other words, you may have, out of 9 planets, you may have 3 in fire, 1 in earth, and the rest in air, or vice versa. It's a really wonderful way to look at yourself or the person you're trying to help through astrology with the energy and think, how much balance do I have in my life? If you have a lot of air in your life, that means that you really need to, when you hear a partner or, someone you're close to, if you have a ton of air, you're probably going to hear, I just don't feel connected to you. I just don't at times feel like you're really there. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the groundedness. People with a lot of air aren't as grounded. They're up here in their intellect. They're up in their minds. They're not rooted in their 2 feet on the ground physically or emotionally. People with a lot of air in their chart, they might hear this from a partner or a loved one. I wish you would, show me more physical affection. I wish you would just be present more. How about that? Air people, a text is fine. They rule electronics. A text is fine, emails are fine. They feel like they've connected. No, having dinner with an air sign is really, getting them stuck in one place and get them to stop moving for a minute and actually be with you. That's something that a lot of air signs need to work on. So if you hear these sorts of nudges or criticisms from your loved ones and you have a ton of air in your chart, listen. It's great. It's great to help you balance and sort of get out of your rut, because we all, whatever element we're strongest in, we get in that rut. Now, let's say you don't have enough air. Then you need to lean into the things that air teaches us. We talked about how certain elements don't work together. Well, here's a way, that you can really use that. I've had clients come to me and they have a chart that's very, full of water. In other words, a lot of their planets, the majority of their planets or cusps of their houses are in the water signs. Gosh, those folks, out of anybody, I would reach for air to tell them that they need more balance in their life with the air element. And that means they might stay too much, get stuck in their emotions. It may take them too long to pull up and get out of something that's happened. Air signs teach us things bounce right off them. Literally. I mean, they could have a trauma or some emotional moment or a breakup or whatever, and they're like, okay. And then they move on to the next thing because they just don't go deep with all the emotions. That's not their world that they like to live in. So on the flip side, in the good way, they teach us how to move on. They teach us how to kind of get out of being stuck and keep moving. So if you are somebody who has a ton of earth or a ton of water, look to the air qualities. If you hear, God, I wish you would just move on, or, you need to get out of the house, or, you eat the same thing every day. We never travel. We never go out. That kind of person is an air sign or a water sign. They like to be home, which is a good quality, but not in excess, right? So the air signs teach us, keep moving. The air signs teach us, be open to new ideas. The air signs teach us, wow, it's so fun to be on the cutting edge of where everything is headed. It's so fun to learn something new. It's so fun to be confused and try to figure something out. Puzzles are fun. Things that are miraculous that we can't figure out how it works is fun. Figuring out how something works is fun. Why do things grow? Why do things work? Astrology is ruled by air. Astrology is ruled by Aquarius, but it's ruled by air. It's a very air sign endeavor. It's very analytical. It's very kind of cutting edge. It's very marching to the beat of its own drum. A lot of air signs, they march to the beat of their own drum. Even the Libras, who are probably the more conservative of the three, Gemini and Aquarius, they all march to the beat of their own drums. Now, Gemini and Aquarius, they're always the ones who are kind of out there. God bless them. But, we all can learn a little bit from an air sign. Who cares what people think? I'm marching to my own drum. Why don't we try something new? That's what we learn from our air signs. So, in conclusion, again, I just want to say, think about what you can learn or draw from when it comes to air. And think about also, are you too much air? If this is all you think about or all you are, think about reaching for a more emotional life, or really, really not being defensive when someone says, I wish you'd be more grounded. I wish you'd be more physical. I wish you'd be more here. So all the elements can teach us how to get in balance. And to really get in balance is to be conscious of and think about all the elements and where we can incorporate each of those, beautiful qualities into our lives. It helps us be a better person, which is why we're here in the first place. And which is why, gosh, I even want to be doing these shows, is to try to help people think about themselves and become more self-aware about where they can improve or where they're out of balance. Because really all astrology is, you guys, is a way to describe energy. It's a way to describe the different energies that are archetypical in the human experience. So I've really enjoyed the show today, you guys. I enjoyed talking about air signs. Again, I'd love to hear from any of you about this. I actually get into some conversations about people's charts online, so more than happy to discuss things and hear from all of you. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time. The next show that I'm going to do about elements is going to be about fire, which is really always exciting and dramatic. So we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.